That's the moment when I saw an engineer in you whom I would love to work with. 2-3 moments like this with me, and I would say a strong hire. I want this guy on my team. Before that, you were a bit too reserved to my taste.
Hey, I'm Kevin Landucci with ApplyPass.com. This video is about the distance between mid-level and senior engineering offers. A lot of it comes down to presentation. So we're going to have an engineer get coached up by a super senior engineer so you can see the difference for yourself. Hope you like it.
I'm a senior software engineer, level 4. I'm interviewing with different companies lately for an L5 position. I was working at Cruise, the self-driving car company, but I also have a PhD in data structures for DNA sequencing.
Why don't you start, Alex? Just tell us a couple things about yourself. What would you usually say?
I most recently worked at Cruise for about 7 years. I joined as one of the first 100 engineers there. I was working on the route planning team. So it's kind of like Google Maps for a robot. I was mostly focusing on the fine-tuned controls for that, like avoid this area, be attracted to this area. But I think I was most well known for being the owner and lead developer of a Python and C++ library that wrapped the router that was used by hundreds of other staff to do interactive and automated analysis.
Trying to get a sense of the level at which you present yourself. And so far, it's not clear how much of this work, to scope this work to your level, since you're trying to present yourself, right? Not only I need to understand what your role was, but also it's important for your story to illustrate how much ownership did you have. What I'm getting at slowly is that presentation matters. And the way I like to say it is, imagine you practice this. Imagine it's a scene from a Tarantino movie, and you have to get the audience captivated within a couple of sentences. And you have to practice this for many, many times. It's an art. It's hard to get there. And I'm not claiming to have this mastered myself. But with practice, you do get there. I'm not hearing the pride. I'm not hearing the enthusiasm. I'm not saying you should fake it. Just make it more clear to me. Imagine I'm your TL or manager or architect 5 years from now or 1 year from now. How do I know today what can I trust you with versus what you'd rather have me do without you? Open up on that.
I think there's some hesitation, partly because I wasn't the first person to work on that. Someone else kind of built that project when I was L3, but then I took ownership of that. I added documentation for all the functions and like 94% test coverage and ran tutorials and fielded all feature requests and bug reports and so on. And I did most of the implementation. Occasionally I would delegate to some other people to kind of share the technical knowledge there and technical ownership. But yeah, I guess I was the main point of contact for that, as well as building tools around that, handling releases. Yeah.
Okay, this we can certainly improve.
Okay.
Primarily because the way you phrased it was very much bottom up. But this time you had the top-down story. I probed deeper and you almost started apologetically. Like, it was actually not me who started that. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. If you are uncomfortable confessing to that, so to speak, you can open up with that. You can just say, I joined the company. There was this project. Someone started it. It was growing and the guy was leaving or whatnot. Up or company, they were doing something else. So I had to take ownership. That's all good. That's exactly the same message, right? That it shows that you care. That's number one. Number two is there's a level so that if you present yourself below the ceiling, so to speak, it's hard to dig yourself out of the hole. So when you talked about like test cover, I don't think it matters at higher levels. Like in a way, that's one of the rules you have to break if you're a super high level person. So if the interviewer is asking you what you take pride in and you say, the test coverage was improved, that's a strong sign you care more about what you do with your hands, which is cool. Don't get me wrong. But the more senior you get, the more exposure you're supposed to present. That, hey, this helped the company in certain ways because ABC. So let's try again. Talk to us about what the impact of that. Specifically, why did other people like using it? How did you incorporate their feedback? Let's try it again.
It made it very easy to define experiments in how we would change the route behavior and also to test individual PRs and measure how routing is affected there. And it also gave tools to visualize routes in a simulation editor. So that gave a faster feedback loop for development cycles. It also served as a very useful, it was a really useful debugging tool. If we put all the same inputs in, we could see and kind of backtrack why the router made this decision rather than that decision. It was used, going back to that like what if like experiment thing, it was used a lot for doing abletion analyses to determine what is the most important maneuver we can work on right now and which is the area of the map we need to remap with the highest priority.
There might be an issue here that, hey, it was one of the biggest improvements, revelations, that certain parts of the map need to be fixed, or certain areas are more dangerous than we expected. If your work helped uncover this, you got to be proud of this, man. That's real awesome, right? And it didn't read through what you said. What you said was that I built that. It was helpful. Your pride, your identity is mostly tied to what you did with your hand.
I think it would be cool to see the comparison. So Dima, if you could think about like yourself, one where you're focused on what you did with your fingertips, and then with that same example, reframing it to you focusing on the objectives of value for other people. So we can see like A, B.
Why don't we work with Alex's example? We totally can, I think. So Level 1 is what you did. Level 2 would be along the lines of, so at Cruise, we always knew routing is key. And there may well have been low-hanging fruit hanging there. We just had to figure out where to look at. And when I joined the company, the tooling for this was immature. It was good enough to highlight we can do better, but it didn't quite deliver. And the company was eager to invest into this because it was clear that a couple engineer quarters could do miracles. And that's exactly where you stepped in. So in the terms and numbers you're comfortable talking about, what value did your work help the company unlock?
And I'm talking to, this isn't me being in a mock interview. But there was a time where I had to debug something without a log that for an issue that was happening in Austin, and apparently it was going to cost us like $1 million a week or something like that on that order. And I was able to, I had to not just debug that, but kind of chase down people who can maybe get me those logs, like delegate the task to work that out for me to get me those logs while I debugged without logs and communicated with someone on the ground to compile and test my PRs to test those hypotheses. And then after all of that, I wrote a playbook for when we launch in new cities so that stuff doesn't happen again.
What did you think about the way he presented that? He said, I'm not talking like this is a mock interview, but I thought that he was speaking actually maybe the clearest of all the answers.
Exactly. And I'm trying to get to this point from a different angle. So interviewing arc. It's almost comical that you presented an awesome thingy, but then you're downplaying the most important part. And I said you had to chase people as if you're embarrassed that you have to chase people. What Step Plus engineers do most of the time is chase people, finding more effective ways to chase people. And then you said, hey, by the end of the day, there was a playbook I wrote to help work on this later on. That's cross-team fostering. That's magnification of your expertise for the future generations to come. That's major. The fact that you were trusted to do that and it was used back then, like afterwards, after you. That's exactly what people who are far above senior do. I can tell you that if I put on my engineer TL hat, not a manager or hiring manager or whatnot, the architect, when you were speaking about this, you were the guy I want to work with. I could visualize us two working on something together. You would say, hey, Dima, I need help chasing down those guys. I would say, fine, and I'll do it. You do your thing. That's the moment when I saw an engineer in you whom I would love to work with. 2-3 moments like this with me, and I would say, strong hire. I want this guy on my team. Before that, you were a bit too reserved to my taste. It's still passable, but I would say my feedback would read like, this guy is smart. He seems to get things done. Please probe deeper into what his hands-on role is and how he views his contribution to the company, to the culture, to the world, etc., etc. This time it was perfect. No extra questions needed. I see who you are. I like it. Let's work together.